His murder spree was first discovered on a cold December day when the first of his victims were found in the crawl space beneath his home. They were taken out one by one as the world watched.
April 9th, 1979. Robert Piest was found dead 4 months after being reported missing. A beloved 36-year-old businessman and politician who volunteers at children's hospitals in a clown costume is the main suspect. This is just the tip of an iceberg hiding the deaths of 33 confirmed men and boys. Let's review the horrors leading to the final 24 hours of John Wayne Gacy. On March 17, 1942, John Wayne Gacy was born in Chicago, Illinois. He had a difficult childhood, marked by an abusive alcoholic father, who was a source of constant physical and mental abuse for John and his family. His father was disappointed in him at every level, starting with his very name. He had been named John Wayne, after the famous Hollywood actor, a prevalent icon of masculinity at the time. Gacy struggled with his weight and a congenital heart condition, which made him suffer bullying every time he declined to participate in physical activities with other children. As if this wasn't enough, he also experienced abuse from a family friend. Psychologists believe these events made him socially awkward, generally inadequate, and insecure. This would reflect later in his killer phase when he became a sadist with an absolute need to control his victims.
I worked as a night man only. I did have nothing to do with the bodies. All this talk that I slept with the dead ones or had sex with dead bodies, there is no truth to any of that.
At 18, Gacy got his first job as an embalmer and funeral planner in Las Vegas, where he allegedly started to develop inappropriate inclinations and perform indecent acts on the bodies of the deceased. Gacy later graduated from business school and worked as a shoe salesman while volunteering for political campaigns. In 1964, he moved to Springfield, Illinois, where he met Marilyn Myers, his later wife and mother of 2 children. In 1965, Gacy became a manager for his father-in-law's KFC franchises in Waterloo, Iowa. He made an effort to become a well-respected member of society and even joined a charitable organization. But even after he became a prominent figure in the community, rumors began to circulate about Gacy's sexual preferences and inappropriate behavior towards male employees. Despite his outward appearance as a perfect family man and respected professional, Gacy struggled with alcoholism, drug use, and infidelity, harboring fantasies and desires for other men. He even built a room in his basement to invite men for drinks and maintain intimacy without being caught. He always denied these accusations.
They paint the image that I was this monster who picked up like these altar boys along the street and swatted them like flies. I said, this is ludicrous.
March 1968. While his wife and children were away, he invited Donald Voorhees Jr. to his house, got him drunk, and forced him into intimacy, threatening to kill him if he told anyone. But Voorhees told everything to his parents, leading to Gacy's arrest and a sodomy charge. Gacy claimed the accusations were false and part of a strategy to discredit him. However, it was proven that he even hired someone to beat Voorhees, which raised further questions about his innocence. The investigation revealed that Gacy had created this pattern of attracting men with the promise of jobs or money, making them drunk, and then sexually assaulting them. His psychiatric examination revealed he suffered from antisocial personality disorder, and that same year, he was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in a maximum security prison in Iowa.
He claims that he was sexually abused by me. And in essence, he was blackmailing me for it. Now, what it boiled down to was oral copulation. And it was consensual.
After the conviction, he admitted to the intimacy with the minor, but claimed he was the victim in this case because it was all a trap, and always maintained this version. Unbelievably, he was imprisoned in the Iowa State Men's Reformatory and released on parole in the summer of 1970, after just 18 months, with an additional 12 months under surveillance. After his parole, his wife divorced him, and he decided not to see his children again, returning to Chicago to live with his mother and begin a new life. In Chicago, where his face and criminal record were unknown, Gacy bought a house at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue with his mother's help. He was well received by neighbors, who saw him as an exemplary man who founded his own business. He often organized gatherings for his neighbors, cooked barbecues, and dressed up as an extravagant clown to entertain neighborhood children and young people. He became famous around children's hospitals due to his many clowning appearances.
To me, clowning it was a way of relaxation for me. You regressed into childhood, you were able to relax, and you could be goofy if you wanted to, and still you had the facade of your face being covered.
But of course, Pogo the Clown was nothing more than a facade for Gacy's darkest impulses, and the origin story for all the killer clown imagery that influenced famous pop culture products, such as Stephen King's Pennywise the Clown from IT. In 1971, he created his businessman persona and established his own construction business, which operated under the name PDM Contractors. This business was the perfect facade for him to be in contact with his favorite demographic: men never older than 25 years of age. He would select, interview, and recruit every one of them. That same year, Gacy allegedly attacked a man who tried to denounce him, but after the police asked him to come to the station and ratify his accusation, the victim didn't appear. Without any evidence against him, Gacy was easily let go. January 2nd, 1972. Gacy met Timothy McCoy all by himself at the bus station. He convinced him that it was too late for someone his age to be alone in the night and offered to receive him in his house. The next morning, the boy was spreading butter on a toast when Gacy, believing he was about to attack him, killed Timothy with several stab wounds in a quick act of self-defense. This attack had a profound desensitizing effect on his mind. Gacy later confessed that this was a pivotal moment for him. He discovered a strong and troubling connection between sexual gratification and killing, and declared that he experienced an orgasm while stabbing the boy and listening to his gurgulations and gasping for breath. Gacy's murder spree began in 1972 and lasted until 1978, when he was finally arrested. By then, he had developed a systematic modus operandi that blended manipulation and carefully administered violence. He had already established vulnerable males as his prey, and besides picking them among job applicants, he also frequented places where he could find male prostitutes or hitchhikers. Authorities concluded he may have posed as a law enforcement officer sometimes. By keeping a red light and a police radio in his car, he was able to gain a victim's trust. Once he managed to get the victim in his home, Gacy would turn to his acting abilities and employ a signature and effective handcuff trick. He would present handcuffs as a magic trick, first demonstrating how he could get out of them himself and then convince his victim to put them on and try to imitate him. But he used real handcuffs, of course, and once the victims were bound and helpless, he took complete control of them. Sexual abuse was then followed by strangulation with a rope or another tool, usually making a very specific Boy Scout tourniquet knot. After the murder, he needed to dispose of the bodies. His system was very straightforward. He would take the bodies to the crawl space beneath his house and bury them. Covering them with lime to speed up decomposition and mask the smell was a nice trick, but it would later prove insufficient when facing the number of bodies the monster clown had to take care of.
Supposedly went down in the crawl space, crawled around. There was no mounds of dirt, there was no odor, there was no nothing. I never feared anybody going down the crawl space.
In 1972, Gacy married his second wife, Carol, a woman who was aware of his past, including a stint in jail and his bisexuality. Still, Carol accepted him, fooled by his good behavior and new reputation as a model citizen. It would be later when his guests would start noticing a foul smell coming from beneath his house, which Gacy always attributed to faulty pipes. In 1974, Gacy committed his first known murder, if we are to believe his self-defense story with McCoy, though this victim remained unidentified. He admitted to suffocating the victim after abusing him and then storing the body in a closet before burning him. Then, on July 31st, 1975, John Butkovich, an 18-year-old employee, was reported missing. When questioned, Gacy claimed Butkovich had come to his house with friends to demand a late payment. The reality was obviously different. Gacy had lured Butkovich into his home and followed his MO to the letter. He handcuffed him under the pretense of his clown act, raped and killed him. He then buried the man's body under the concrete floor of his garage. But in 1976, his life changed as his marriage began to crumble. Carol started asking too many questions about the persistent pestilence invading their home, and she became increasingly upset about his frequent escapades and troubling associations with young men. Carol, in a smart move, divorced Gacy that same year, citing a lack of intimate relations as the cause. Gacy's behavior worsened after the divorce. His wider degree of freedom pushed him toward a careless increase in his literal manhunts. He brought more and more young men to his house late at night, often letting strange screams escape into the night. Gacy would later refer to this dark and intense period as his cruising years, when he easily executed his most perverse desires.
That they were looking for sensationalism and they were looking for the monster.
When you say fantasy monster image, what are you referring to by that?
Well, the idea that I'm a homosexual thrill killer and all that garbage.
Gacy was a killer ghost during this phase, completely invisible to the authorities, thanks to his good citizen facade that had helped him stay out of suspicion. He had killed so many people that there was no more room for bodies beneath his house. As the crawl space filled up, his first thought was to use the attic to hide them, but then he decided to get rid of his last 4 victims by throwing them into the Des Plaines and Illinois rivers. This break of a well-established pattern was a serious indication of a loss of control and a growing compulsion to kill. He had indeed become a thrill killer. By 1978, he was telling his neighbors that a nest of dead rats was the source of the rancid smells coming from his property. December 11th, 1978. Gacy visited a local pharmacy to discuss remodeling work and met Robert Piest, a teenager working there. The boy heard Gacy was a contractor who paid well and accepted an offer to double his current salary. Gacy then put his MO in motion. He took Piest to his house and proceeded to arch-rape and murder him. His mother reported the boy's absence to the police and mentioned that he had left with a contractor from the pharmacy. After those details, it wasn't hard to identify John Gacy as a suspect. The police, led by Des Plaines Detective Lieutenant Joseph Kozenchak, quickly discovered his past offenses and visited him, but he denied offering Piest a job and went against the witness testimonies. Years later, he would admit to being an accomplice in Piest's murder, but deny having killed him.
Robert Piest was killed by another individual in my home.
How did he get to your home?
He was transported to the house by another.
The police made an initial sweep of his house. They found several suspicious items, such as handcuffs, police insignia, suspicious syringes, small pieces of underwear, explicit films, weapons, and several driver's licenses. The detectives also discovered a receipt for a roll of film belonging to a friend of Piest's, which the teenager had offered to get developed. This was crucial evidence to establish the first and most critical link between Gacy and the missing boy. But Piest was nowhere to be found yet. Almost 2 weeks later, on December 20th, 1978, the investigators gathered enough evidence to request a warrant for a full search. Gacy had no option but to invite the officers to his house, and one of them immediately noticed the putrid smell coming from a heating duct. The cops wouldn't buy any story about rats or faulty pipes. Still, they allowed Gacy to spend the night at home with his promise of clearing everything up the next day. December 21st, 1978, Gacy pumped himself full of alcohol and confessed to his lawyers that he had thrown Piest's body into a river. More shockingly, he admitted to killing at least 30 people. The detectives were concerned he might harm himself before they could catch him, so they arrested him on a drug charge after he was seen handing a package of marijuana to a gas station clerk. That same afternoon, a judge granted a full search warrant for Gacy's property. The search area was flooded, and the team had to wait for it to drain before continuing their investigation.
They are the ones that took the orange can of paint and said, here, put a mark there, so I put an X there.
So the paint was not to identify the place of burial?
No, it never was.
A forensic evidence technician discovered multiple human remains while searching the crawl space beneath the house. They went there looking for Piest, but there were many more bodies buried in the area. Gacy initially tried to dismiss the findings, but the evidence was undeniable. The following day, he provided his first official statement. He attempted to deny any responsibility by claiming the victims had voluntarily come to his house and had consensual sex with him. Either way, he admitted to killing Robert Piest and confessed that he had disposed of the body in the Des Plaines River. His body would be retrieved on April 9, 1979. After the confession, Gacy was then asked to create a diagram indicating the locations of the buried bodies. Using a can of orange spray paint, he drew stick figures revealing the position of the bodies buried beneath the house. The forensic experts recovered the remains of 29 bodies, many of them exhibiting signs of abuse, with objects in their throats and ropes around their necks sporting his signature Boy Scout tourniquet knot. The clown enjoyed seeing his victims die asphyxiated. 2 more bodies were later found in the Des Plaines River, and a 4th one in the Illinois River. The House of Horrors that served as the tomb of the other 29 victims was demolished that same month. Sadly, 8 of the 33 victims remained unidentified. February 6, 1980, John Wayne Gacy's trial began. He had already confessed, but he pleaded not guilty all the same as he claimed mental illness. Gacy's defense argued that
a monster was taking over him,
and that
he was not mentally healthy.
they even tried to involve a team of psychiatrists in the claim that he suffered some kind of personality disorder since he harbored 4 distinct individuals who were part of him: the politician, the contractor, the straight man, and the clown. A total of 13 psychiatrists evaluated Gacy. The experts on the defense side diagnosed him as a paranoid schizophrenic with multiple personalities. The ones on the prosecution side argued he was a cold, calculating, and sane individual who was mentally sound and acted with premeditation. A detailed diagram of the burial sites he drew for the police was cited as evidence of not the actions of a person out of control, but rather a rational individual asserting his dominance. On March 12, 1980, after a 6-week trial and many unsuccessful attempts at proving his insanity, Gacy was found guilty of 33 murder charges, making it the largest murder case in U.S. history at that time. Gacy received multiple life sentences and death sentences, but his way through death row wouldn't be a quick or easy one.
After barely 2 hours deliberation, its verdict was murder by Gacy, 33 times, 29 bodies buried in that house of his on Summerdale, a crime of horrendous proportions.
Gacy's conviction wasn't followed by a quick execution. A seemingly unending period of 14 years passed while waiting on death row. The main reason for this delay was his multiple appeals for a reduced sentence. In these extra legal procedures, Gacy continued clowning in a different role, a theatrical performance in which he desperately tried to sell himself as just an accomplice, or a scapegoat, or even a victim. Despite everything he had confessed and the tons of evidence against him, he made a 180-degree turn and focused his appeal strategy on denying his guilt, even on TV. From fabricating excuses and alibis to obsessively investigating personal details of his victims, he tried to build an absurd narrative to make himself look at least somewhat credible.
How did the other, whoever he was, kill Robert Piest?
I believe he was
You were there, right?
not during the crime, but I was there afterwards and I watched the removal of the body.
For example, he claimed his house on Summerdale Avenue was the headquarters for his company, PDM Contractors, and a flop house for its employees. This put him in the position of an occasional visitor to the crime scene and created the possibility that some of his employees, namely Michael Rossi, David Cram, and Philip Pask, who had keys to his house, were the real culprits. His other stories were even more demented. In one of them, he had a drink with Johnny Zick, one of the victims, and Michael Rossi, his employee, only to return the next day and find Zick dead in the house. The craziest part was that he decided it wasn't his business and let Rossi bury the body in his crawl space. In other stories, he would be this work-obsessed businessman with a drug problem who was not in his right mind and therefore not criminally responsible for the murders. One time he would know about one killing and become an accomplice who helped dispose of the body, and the next time he'd had no idea about any murders and would explain the putrid stench beneath his house as a plumbing issue or a rat infestation. His lowest attempt at appearing innocent and sane took the religious route. He converted to Christianity in prison and claimed to be at peace with himself. His newfound faith helped him welcome death.
I don't sit around worrying about the death penalty. If you believe you've lived your life the right way, then you do not have anything to fear.
If they want to be convinced or brainwashed into what they believe, then fine, then go ahead and kill me. But vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, because you will have executed somebody that didn't commit the crime.
All these pathetic appeals were ultimately denied. However, Gacy's legal team never gave up and launched many final appeals in the days leading up to his execution. They even tried to declare his execution method, lethal injection, as unconstitutional, alleging severe mental illness. Every judicial body they reached denied their attempts at reversing the capital punishment, state and federal courts, and ultimately the U.S. Supreme Court. May 9, 1994. After 14 years incarcerated at Menard Correctional Center, John Wayne Gacy's final day had come. A helicopter transferred him to the designated location for his execution, the Stateville Penitentiary in Joliet, Illinois. Around 9 a.m., Karen Gacy, John's sister, arrived in the penitentiary. She was the only family member who came to visit him since everyone else had completely cut ties with him after his murders went public. She spent the whole day with his brother and even took a picture with him, a smiling hug that seemed to ignore everything that was happening.
It's shocking to see them in that final picture.
Taken merely hours away from his execution, looking happy and oblivious. However, Karen reflected on it years later.
A lot of people would probably think, how could you be hugging him? Or whatever, but he was my brother. You know, I didn't ever know the evil part of him.
Gacy also received several visits from old neighbors who, despite the overwhelming evidence against the nightmare clown, showed an outpouring of support toward him. These people reportedly got extremely emotional and created a somber atmosphere as they insisted on reflecting about Gacy as a good citizen, a perfect neighbor, and a beloved member of the community. Karen Conti, Gacy's attorney, reported how people still adored him, even after years of knowing about his deeds. The prosecutors who secured his conviction, on the other hand, celebrated with a pre-execution barbecue dinner. Meanwhile, Gacy's legal team was running against the clock to introduce so-called 11th-hour appeals in a desperate attempt to stop the process. The defense team argued to the Illinois courts and then to the U.S. Supreme Court that their client needed to be declared insane and judged accordingly. They also tried to argue that the jury for his original 1980 trial had been improperly selected. These efforts were useless in the end. The Illinois Prisoner Review Board had already arrived at a unanimous decision to deny Gacy any type of clemency. Moreover, a spokesperson for Governor Jim Edgar stated the governor saw no reason to intervene, believing the courts had already reviewed the case in depth. In the afternoon, Gacy received a visit from a Catholic priest. He had explicitly requested this service as he wanted to receive the final Catholic sacraments and properly confess his sins. Gacy's behavior during his final hours was reportedly pleasant and at ease. He never showed himself as nervous or stressed, and even allowed himself to be chatty, making easy small talk and even discussing baseball-related prospects and statistics. As the evening approached, the guards moved him to a holding cell just a few feet away from the execution chamber. Gacy's final meal was a symbolic one. We'll never know if this was a subconscious choice or a planned last declaration. His requested meal was 12 fried shrimp, a bucket of original recipe KFC, French fries, and a pound of fresh strawberries, with the chicken being the symbolic part. He had once managed his father-in-law's KFC franchises in Waterloo, Iowa, and during those years he started building his family-oriented, businessman, and community-driven persona. He even insisted on being called Colonel at local meetings, just like KFC's Colonel Sanders.
His real feelings come out.
That one mother that gets on television all the time who thinks I should be given 33 injections, I think she ought to take 33 Valiums and go lay down.
He tried very hard to leave that final impression, but every time he had slipped in those interviews in which he showed his true, cold, and dismissive mind, the businessman had been pushed away from the people's perception, leaving only the absolute lack of sympathy and humanity of the killer clown. After finishing his plentiful last meal, Gacy was allowed to take a shower and change into a fresh prison uniform. They offered him the possibility of making a last phone call, but he politely declined. Shortly before midnight, as Gacy was brought from the holding cell to the execution chamber, two groups of demonstrators gathered outside Stateville Penitentiary, one against the death penalty and one in favor. The chants and songs of the pro-capital punishment demonstrators were reportedly so loud They could be heard from inside the execution building.
Death penalty demonstrators at the prison who favored the execution far outnumbered the candle-carrying death penalty opponents.
All opposition aside, there was nothing else anyone could do. Gacy was strapped to a gurney as members of the media, victims' families, law enforcement officials, his sister Karen, and other witnesses watched his execution. In the first row was William Kunkel, a chief prosecutor during Gacy's trial. He said he had asked for the invitation since he thought that
Any prosecutor who seeks the death penalty should have the guts to be there and see it. And I wanted to be sure he was dead, as a personal matter.
when the clock reached 12:30 a.m., the lethal injection began. It was a three-part procedure designed to act quickly and cleanly. 3 intravenous drugs were to be injected in a predetermined sequence, and the whole thing wasn't supposed to take more than 5 minutes. Sodium thiopental came first, designed to induce a state of unconsciousness. Then pancuronium bromide would suppress breathing, and the third and final injection, potassium chloride, was to stop the heart. The drugs were supposed to be injected one right after the other, but the IV delivery tube attached to Gacy's arm clogged, and the second drug injection was delayed for approximately 10 to 20 minutes. Witnesses reported Gacy snorting during the embarrassing failure as the medical team worked to clear the IV tube. The execution, scheduled as a 5-minute show, took 18 minutes instead. Those who advocated for abolishing the death penalty used this procedural failure to point out the inefficiency surrounding execution methods and the possibility of human error. For them, even humane methods such as the lethal injection were barbaric and inhumane. At 12:58 a.m., John Wayne Gacy, aka Pogo the Clown, was pronounced dead. Despite the logistical problems, the truth is that, unlike his 33 victims, he had a swift and peaceful ending. For the families, this bittersweet final act of justice wasn't enough punishment for his horrible acts.
His victims' families wanted more pain.
I'm glad it's over. I just wish that there could have been more suffering, so to speak. The punishment doesn't fit the crime.
A lot has been said about Gacy's final words, from the sensationalist tagline to the absence of a declaration. The popular account, widely reported and referenced, is that he said,
"Kiss my ass."
or even,
"Kiss my ass. They will never know where the rest is."
a chilling final hint at the possibility that he had a higher victim count than the official one for which he was convicted and executed. There's a big probability that more bodies have not yet been found or linked to Gacy's murders by the authorities. He often hinted at this possibility and used it to taunt the authorities and the victims' families. It could have been a textbook psychopath power move. 8 of Gacy's victims remained unidentified for decades, and only with DNA technology advances has the Cook County Sheriff's Police Department identified 3 of them since 2011. Our reports claimed that Gacy played being the victim and pointing a finger back at the state of Illinois for murdering him, and assuring everyone AI that taking his life would not compensate for the loss of the others, and constantly tried to use what the experts call neutralization techniques to shift blame to others and portray himself as the 34th victim.
I'm not only the victim here. I might be the 34th victim, but there are other victims to this crime, and that is the family. Because if I know that I didn't commit the crime, then I have been given the injustice.
Prosecutor William Kunkel, the one with the first row seat at the execution, declared that there wasn't any kind of show.
No words were spoken at all.
After his execution, a mandatory autopsy was conducted, and it was officially determined that the lethal injection had been the cause of death. Gacy's brain was donated to science for study. After being dissected and examined, scientists could not find any kind of injuries or abnormalities that explained his psychopathic behavior, but his recorded words remained forever a testimony of his total lack of sympathy and human connection. Forgotten names, impossible alibis, and fantastic excuses. 33 human lives stolen, just for the sake of an evil clown's trick.
We have a shot of all of the victims together here. And when you look over at the photos, I have no recollection of any of them. Never met them.